All right, hi, it's Miss Molesbury here, and today is review day. Yay! So you've learned it all. The test, remember, covers adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing rational functions, also solving, and word problems. The review is a really good review. So everything on the test is covered on the review. Make sure you find day 6 in your review packet or your notes packet, so page 13. And basically I've picked out a problem of each type. So we're going to work through a certain type of problem. Then I'm going to have you pause the video and keep doing those types of questions on the review. So let's just start with the word problems. Everybody's favorite. Let's get them out of the way. Number 1 says, if Bob can mow the lawn in 5 hours and Pete can mow the lawn in 3 hours, how long will it take for them to mow the lawn together? I promise you will see a word problem like this. So remember we said we're setting up our word problem. All these have fractions. That's kind of the point of the whole unit. So Bob plus Pete equals together. And as we write their rates, the fraction we used is 1 over 5 for Bob. So that's saying Bob completes one task every 5 hours. That's his rate of task completion. Doesn't matter what the task is. Pete completes one lawn every 3 hours. And then it says, how long will it take them to mow the lawn together? So that unknown amount of time together is our x. So we're going to say 1 over an unknown amount of time together. And then we know, just before we even go to solve, that we should be getting a number smaller than 5 and smaller than 3. Because if they work together, they're going to be going faster than either of them can do alone. So remember, when we solve, we want to find the least common denominator and make all the fractions have that denominator. So it looks like we would need to have a 5 and a 3 and an x, right? So 15x, or I'm going to leave it separate here. So as I look at the first fraction and I say, what is it missing? Well, it has the 5, but it needs the 3 and the x. So we're going to go multiply the first fraction by 3x and 3x. And then remember, we're just solving the equation in the numerator. So all I'm going to have is 1 times 3x is 3x. We're going to move on to the second fraction. It has the 3, but it doesn't have the 5 or the x. So we're going to go multiply by 5x in the numerator and denominator. So 1 times 5x is just 5x. And here we get 1 over x, and it's missing the 5 and the 3. So we're going to go multiply by that 5 and 3, or we could just write 15, and that would be fine. So 1 times 5 times 3 is 15. And so just to double check, we made all the denominators have 15x, but we're only solving the equation in the numerator. So let's go add the 3x and 5x is 8x equals 15. Divide by 8. And then we're likely to get decimals on these problems, and that's okay. So 15 divided by 8, 1.875. And then every word problem should have some sort of unit. So let's make sure that makes sense. We were looking for how long it'll take them to mow together. They were mowing in a certain amount of hours, so it's going to take them less than 2 hours to mow together. On the test, if you were wondering how to round, I mean, if you put 1.8 or 1.9, that's also okay. But I expect to see your work, so I know where that number is coming from. So in case you do round differently, I can see that you got the right answer. Okay, we're going to go ahead and set up number 2, and then I'm going to let you solve it on your own. So 2 says, and I promise you'll see another word problem like this on the test. These are the 2 types you'll see. But you've shot 24 free throws, and you've made 16 of them. So right now, you're a 66.67% free throw shooter. So basically, you've made 2/3 of your shots. If you want to get the percentage up to 75%, how many free throws in a row would you have to make to reach your goal? So we're trying to look and see here. X is the free throws that we have to make from here on out. So to set this up, just a reminder, it's how many we actually made over the attempted amount is how we're calculating that. And so currently we have made 16, but we are going to add to that. So we don't know how many we have to add, but we're going to keep adding to the amount we make. And the 24 that we've attempted so far, we're also going to add to our attempted. Every time we make one, that's another attempted one. And the goal is that we're getting our percentage to 75%. So we said you can always make that just 75 over 100. And you could go just put that as what your equation's equal to, 75 over 100. But then you're dealing with bigger numbers in your problem. So I would first, no matter the problem, go type it in your calculator. And maybe you know 75 out of 100, think about 75 cents out of $1. Oh man, I didn't realize this app doesn't do it for you here, but the 0.75 math enter on your school calculator, it would just say and reduce it to 3/4 for you. Once you type it as a fraction in your calculator, so we could set this equal to 3/4. Oops, here's my pen. Since that's what 75 out of 100 is equal to. So then I'm going to let you solve that one. The least common denominator would be 24 plus x and a 4. And that'll tell you how many free throws you then have to make in a row. Before you take a break and work through the rest of the solving, I want us to also look at number 3. 3 through 6 say to solve. And on the test, it's going to have an extra step where it also says, list your restricted values. And remember, our restricted values are what x cannot be, what we have to exclude because it would make us divide by 0. So we're going to do number 3, and I'll save the other 3 for you. But remember, when we solve, we still need a common denominator. So let's see, we have an x minus 3, an x plus 3, and then an x squared minus 9. Make sure you're always trying to factor anything squared first. So we do know that's going to come from x plus 3 and x minus 3. And therefore we can see, oh, these fractions already have x plus 3 in common and an x minus 3. So our common denominator we need will be x plus 3 and x minus 3. And that's how I then know x cannot be negative 3 from the x plus 3 or positive 3 from the x minus 3. Okay, so now let's go and fix each fraction. The first fraction has the x minus 3, but it's missing x plus 3. So let me get a pen. So we're going to go make this first fraction have the x plus 3 as well. And remember, we're just solving the equation in the numerator. So 7 times x plus 3. I'll distribute that in just a second. Second fraction is missing x minus 3. So the 2 gets multiplied by x minus 3. It's also going to be multiplied in the denominator, but again, once we make all the denominators the same, we don't have to worry about them. And then the third fraction has both x plus 3 and x minus 3, so 42 needs nothing, it stays the same. All right, let's go ahead and distribute this. So we have 7x, 3 times 7 is 21, and then plus 2x minus 6. So we have a 9x on the left side, and 21 minus 6 is 15. So I just combined those like terms since they were on the same side of the equation. Now I'll subtract 15 and get 9x equals 42 minus 15 is 27. Okay, and divide by 9. So I've done all the steps correctly. I get x equals 3. Before you box it, always go back and check, was it a restricted value, your solution? And here it is. We know that x cannot be 3 because if I went and plugged it in, it would give me 7 divided by 0. So I'm going to cross this out and say that there's actually no solution, which you can do with a symbol or with words. And you don't have to list a reason. You could just stop right there and be done. But the reason is because x equals 3 is excluded. You could use the vocabulary, it's an excluded value, it's a restricted value, it makes us divide by 0. But again, all I would expect to see would be crossing out the 3 and telling me that there's actually no solution. Okay, so now you can pause the video and take a few minutes to go back and solve number 2, solve numbers 4, 5, 6, check your answers in Canvas, and then decide what from these problems do you need to put on your note card so that you're able to successfully complete the solving part of the test. So all of these topics we just went over are 1 test grade. Okay, and then once you have time to do that, you're going to come back and we're going to review adding, subtracting, and multiplying and dividing. Okay, hopefully you were able to solve the rest of that first page. Check your answers, put some problems on your note card. The next page is all about adding and subtracting. And it says add or subtract and then simplify. So we're just going to do one of each, 1 addition, 1 subtraction. I would probably put on your note card here, to add and subtract, you need a least common denominator. So that's one thing. And then here, remember our answer should have the LCD and be written as a fraction. So it's a lot of the same process we just did on the first section, except here our answers actually are going to stay as a fraction. We're not solving for x or trying to see what x equals. So number 3, I see it's x over x squared minus 4x plus 3, and then plus 5 over x minus 3. Same thing as solving. If we see something squared, let's try to factor. So remember that there's a good chance they have something in common, not always, but I would factor this first to see maybe there is something in common with the fractions. Okay, so first times last. What multiplies to be positive 3, but adds to be negative 4? We don't have a lot of options. We're going to have to pick 3 and 1. And it looks like they're both going to need to be negative. Remember, if you struggle with the factoring, I'm going to take a second up here just to say, if you were trying to think of what multiplies to be 3, you can go to the calculator and do y equals that number divided by x. And then if you press second graph, it takes you to the table and you would see that our options are 3 and 1 or negative 3 and negative 1. And that's all that we can choose from. So if I know 3 is not that hard of a number, but in a minute, if the numbers get bigger and you need to check in the calculator, there's your reminder. Okay, so our common denominator is going to be the x minus 3 that they already share, and x minus 1. And I'm even going to go just put that in my answer in the denominator. And then I'm going to focus on fixing the fractions. First one has everything it needs. The second one needs x minus 1. And I know the denominator already. I'm just going to focus on what's in the numerator and simplify that part. So x plus 5 times x minus 1, distributing the 5. And then I'm going to add together these x's, and it's going to help me come up with that simplified numerator of 6x minus 5. And that's it. So we have simplified the top. We made sure that the LCD, the least common denominator, is in the bottom. And that's all we have to do. When we first did these, we always wrote them as fractions in every single step. But if you just want to focus on simplifying that numerator, once you know the common denominator, it can save you some time and some brain power. Okay, y'all, one more. Let's do a subtraction. I picked number 8 because it's kind of different than the others. When I look at number 8, I see that it's an x plus 2 and an x minus 3. There's nothing to factor, and there's also nothing in common. So remember, there could be problems where the least common denominator is just both of the denominators, x plus 2 and x minus 3. So I'm going to just write myself, my final answer is going to go here, and it's going to have this denominator. Okay, so the first fraction needs the x minus 3, while the second fraction needs the x plus 2. So I'm going to go write it in the denominator as well, but really that's not where we're doing any sort of calculations or having to work out the denominators. Now they match, so we focus on the numerator. So I'm going to highlight it. There's a minus before that 3. So if I write what the numerators have, it has a 5x times an x minus 3. And then there's a subtraction of 3 times x minus 2. So let's distribute 5x squared, once we do x times x, minus a 15x, a negative 3 times x, so I'm going to write that down. And be careful with your signs here. This is a negative 3 that multiplied by negative 2. So it's going to make a positive 6. And I'm going to combine these like terms and then go write it in my fractional answer. So I have 5x squared minus 18x plus 6, and that's all we could do. Again, no solving on these types of problems. We're just trying to get the common denominator. It's in your answer, and then you're simplifying whatever was in the numerator. So take a few minutes. You're going to work on the rest of this page, including the ones up here that just want the common denominator. Oh, I think 23, I don't know if it printed right on y'all's paper or not. It looks like it's missing an X right here. But you're working through these. Check your answers in Canvas and maybe pick a couple to put on your note card as a reminder of what you're doing when you get to this section of the test. In a minute, we'll come back together and we'll do the last type of problem. Okay, so the last type of problem is different than the others. We've had to come up with a least common denominator on every problem so far. Well, for multiplication and division, no common denominators needed. This is where we get to cancel, factor and cancel. And then there are, I guess, two types. Of course, there's multiply and divide, but then there's some that don't have any addition subtraction, like number 10. And then there's some, like I'm going to do 18 with you, that requires a lot of factoring, and you know that because it has addition subtraction in each of its little numerators and denominators. Okay, so let's start with number 10. I see it's multiplication, so we're just going to multiply straight across the top. So 36 times 2 is 72. Then look at your x's. There are 4 here and 7 in the second fraction. So that means there are 11 x's multiplying in the numerator. Y cubed and y to the 5th means I have y to the 8th. once I've multiplied just across the numerator. We're going to do the same thing. We're just going to multiply straight across the denominator. So 4 times 3 is 12. There's x squared in the first fraction and x cubed in the second. So in total, I have x to the 5th multiplying in the denominator, and then there's a y to the 8th. So step 1 is multiply, and then the directions even say, then simplify, which means we're going to reduce what's there. So let's go again, part by part. We're going to divide or reduce 72 and 12. They can actually divide and leave us with a 6, which I'm going to write in the numerator. Looks like my x's, there are 11 in the numerator, only 5 in the denominator. So think about, they're going to subtract these 5, take away 5 from the numerator, so there will be 6 left multiplying in the top. Ooh, and it looks like my y's are just going to cancel out. So that's it. That's all we're left with. There's nothing left in the denominator of this one. So I'm just going to turn that fraction line into a box for my answer. So like looking at the page, I can tell that 13 is going to be done the same way, except when you see division, we're going to keep the first fraction, change to multiplication, and then don't forget to flip your second fraction. So you're multiplying by the reciprocal, which again, you might remember as keep the first fraction, change to multiplication, and flip. Keep, change, flip. So I'm going to let you do that, but look at number 18 with me. It's a division, so we get to practice keep, change, flip. But we also get to factor, your favorite. Okay, what type of factoring should we always look for first that we always struggle with the most? GCF. So on 18, I can tell that there's an x cubed and a 9x. They both have an x. And so if I divide an x out, now the x cubed is just squared, and the 9 no longer has an x, and we can keep factoring. So I'm going to think through, I took an x out. Now I'm left with perfect squares, difference of squares. So I have x plus 3 and x minus 3. Okay, and then in the denominator, let's think through, it's a trinomial, so we have to think about what multiplies to make 9, but adds to make 6. Again, not the hardest factoring we've done the whole year, just going to be 3 and 3. Both need to be positive. So x plus 3 and x plus 3. I'm going to change this problem to a multiplication, and I'm going to flip the second fraction. So x minus 3 ends up in the denominator. And then it looks like down here, these both have an x, not just one, they both have at least x squared. So I'm going to take an x squared out, and the x cubed will become just an x. The 3x squared now just has a 3. And then we get to the fun part where we get to see what divides and cancels out. So x plus 3 in the top and bottom. There's an x minus 3 in the numerator and denominator. There's an x plus 3 in the numerator and denominator. So I have nothing left in the denominator and just an x times an x squared. So the answer to this problem is just going to be x cubed. Done. Okay, hopefully that helps. I was just looking up ahead. I'm going to pick one more. Let's do 16 as well. Just because when I look at 16, sometimes the ones that are supposed to be easier because they're like just binomials instead actually end up being more difficult. So let's try it. Okay, so it's division, so I know I'm going to keep and change and flip. But let's start with the first fraction. I have 9x squared. In the denominator, even if it's not squared, look for a GCF first, always. So I can divide by 3, and I'm left with 2x, and minus 1 once I divide 6 by 3 and 3 by 3. Changing to multiplication, flipping that second fraction. So now on the top, I'm going to be looking at the 2x squared minus x. They did both have an x, so I'm going to take out that GCF. 2x squared is now just a 2x. And remember x, if you take that out, it still leaves a 1 behind. So that if you tried to multiply this back, it would make 2x squared minus x. And then the 3x squared minus 12x, I'm going to take a 3x out of both of those. And I'm left with, let's see here, an x minus 4. Okay, so when I go to see what is actually canceling out, 2x minus 1, that's clear that it cancels. If you're not sure about everything else, you can always multiply and see what's left. So like the top has a 9x squared times another x, so that's a 9x cubed. The denominator has a 3 times a 3x, so that's a 9x and an x minus 4. So the 9s are going to get to divide here. 9 divided by 9 is going to leave a 1, or just, we don't even have to write it if it's just a 1. And then we can simplify x cubed and x. That's going to reduce down the x from the bottom. We'll cancel 1 out from the top and just leave x squared. So I'm glad I picked that one just because the canceling was a little bit less clear than the one we did on number 18. So you've now seen all the types of problems that are going to be on the test. You have a whole page here of more multiplication and division to practice. And then if there are any topics that you feel like you need more practice on, remember every single lesson had its own practice page that you may or may not have completed. So you can go back through your packet, take it home with you, and use it to help you review and make your note card. And then we'll have the test next class. And don't worry, the next unit gets better. There's hardly any fractions, hardly any factoring. We're going to do transformations again. It'll be a nice break. So hang in there, review hard, and then we'll do the test next class.